Hello, in this video I'm going to say a little about Robert Boyle, who's often seen as being the first modern chemist, but of course he was also a physicist, alchemist, as a lot of them were back then, inventor, and he was one of the big names and one of the big pioneers of science in the 17th century. He's a contemporary of Newton. We can see here he was born in 1627, died in 1691. And he had a massive impact on science in Europe and then the world. So he was an Anglo-Irish scientist. So he was born in Ireland to a family that had not long come over from Great Britain. So during the Tudor plantation, so this is where you had people moving over from Great Britain to Ireland, getting land pretty cheaply, and then they could develop that land, amass great wealth. And Robert Boyle was born into such a family. I mean, he was the seventh son, the 14th child of the Earl of Cork, and he subsequently had a pretty privileged upbringing. He was tutored in Latin, Greek, French. He was sent to Eton when he was 8. Then he travelled around Europe with one of his French tutors. He went to Italy, stayed in Florence for a time. And while he was in Florence, actually, when he was only 14, and I think this was, well, it was the year before Galileo died, I think. So what was that, 1641? And he was in Florence as a 14-year-old studying the paradoxes of the great stargazer, as it was described. So this was the elderly Galileo, who then died the following year. So this is the sort of upbringing and education that not many people would have got at the time. And when his father died, he inherited a manor in Dorset plus large estates in Ireland. So he had a pretty easy way of funding his scientific studies and then and all the other stuff that he was doing. So, and a large part of that was what became known as the Invisible College. So this was a group of scientists, engineers, Boyle, Sir Christopher Wren, the architect and scientist. He was prominent in the group as well. And this was a precursor to the Royal Society, which was set up towards the end of Boyle's life. So another way that he was highly influential. Of course, we know him in our physics studies for Boyle's law, and this came about. So in 1657, he was working alongside Robert Hooke. So Robert Hooke, who I've done another video on, he was helping Boyle out. They were trying to improve the design of the air pump, and through doing this, they then discovered the relationship between pressure and volume of gases, so that the pressure is inversely proportional to volume. And that, of course, is now known as Boyle's law, which is what we've been looking at in this section on thermodynamics. So Boyle's law was published in 1662. And he also did a lot to continue and extend the scientific method. So this is the outline that Francis Bacon came up with of getting experimental evidence and testing theories and laws and such like, and having this checked by your peers. So all of that process that was moving everyone away from the Aristotelian natural philosophy idea of science, where you're sitting there like a mathematician pretty much in an armchair theorizing about things, to having to go out and investigate the world and take measurements. So Boyle spent a lot of time continuing and extending this. Chemistry was his favorite subject, although he was worked in a lot of different areas. And his most famous work, The Skeptical Chemist, which was published in 1661, that placed chemistry as a subject in its own right, not just as an aside to alchemy or physics or something else. It then set it up. He was studying combustion, respiration, chemical analysis. All of this stuff was then given much stronger foundation and set up chemistry as a proper scientific subject. Now, he was also very religious, and he wrote some theological works. He tried to show that science could support Christianity and not be in conflict with it. That the nature of God could be discovered through the scientific inquiry of the world. If God has designed the world and science is inspecting and analysing and describing that design of the natural world, then Boyle saw that as a way of getting insight into the nature of God, into the nature of the creator who had come up with all of this stuff. So yeah, he was very religious. He spent a lot of money on missionary work, promoting Christianity, creating Bibles in vernacular languages, and a lot of this as well fed into the fact that he was a director of the East India Company. So he could use that as a maybe a vehicle and also as a way, an additional way of funding this missionary work, this promotion of Christianity. So yeah, he certainly got into a lot of areas, this guy. And he died in 1691. I mean, that's a decent sort of life considering the time. And yeah, he's buried in St Martin in the Fields, next to Trafalgar Square in London. So there you go, Robert Boyle. I mean, there's a lot more to him than just Boyle's law that we touch on in the thermodynamics videos. So yeah, very interesting stuff. And the whole setup of the Royal Society is definitely something to read more about. It's a fascinating process that they were going through, all of these scientists and engineers collaborating together. It's well worth reading about, and I'll probably get around to doing a separate video on that at some point, because a very interesting time of history. And again, it really uncovers all of the extra layers behind these scientists and engineers, because they can easily get pigeonholed. Oh yeah, Boyle was Boyle's law, and Sir Christopher Wren, oh yeah, he designed St Paul's Cathedral, and that was that, rather than the huge extent of the work that they were doing, and in all the different areas as well, so many different domains that they were operating in. It was a remarkable time where huge progress was made. So I highly recommend having a look into that into more detail as well. So there you go, Robert Boyle, another one to add to our pantheon of influential people in science.